In Ursula K. Leguin's short story, The Bones of the Earth, we learn something of Gontish magic, the magic that is not taught at the island of Roke in the great school where they teach the high arts, but rather a magic that is connected more closely with the earth, in particular the island of Gont, and the people who learn their craft and practice it there. A magic that may be more connected with the old powers. It's not quite clear what the relationship is, but certainly a magic that can go into the very ground, the mountain, the faults that can lead to earthquakes. And we discover that Ogion, who in the previous Earthsea novels has been talked of as the mage who held back the earthquake, did indeed do that, but he did it with a lot of help, including that of his old master and of his master's master, as we're going to find out. Now, this is prefigured in a way by what Nemmerle, the patterner at the time that Dulse is there studying at Roke, and somebody who could have become a friend of Dulce, what he has to say. Nemmerle will, of course, become the archmage later on, and Nemmerle says that it's a rare gift to know where you need to be before you've been to all the places you don't need to be. Well, send me a student now and then. Roke needs Gontish wizardry. I think we're leaving things out here, things worth knowing. And indeed, the knowledge that isn't there at Roke that can be learned as Dulce has done, and he's not going to pass it down entirely to Ogion, but at least some of it, is something from Gont itself. Ard teaches Gontish Matters to Dulce. Ard, by the way, is a woman wizard who he studies with before going to Roke, against the wishes of his father, who is a sorcerer as well. And we learn about this teaching that's taking place. So here we go. As he walked, he thought hard. He recalled all he could of matters his teacher had spoken of only once and long ago. Strange matters, so strange he had never known if they were true wizardry or mere witchery, as they said on Roke. Matters he had certainly never heard about on Roke, nor had he ever spoken about them there, maybe fearing the masters would despise him for taking such things seriously. Maybe knowing they would not understand them because they were Gontish matters, truths of Gont. They were not written even in Ard's lore books that had come down from the great mage Aeneas of Paragal. They were all word of mouth. They were home truths. And what do they have to do? His teacher says, if you need to read the mountain, go to the dark pond at the top of Semare's cow pasture. You can see the ways from there. You need to find the center, see where to go in. And he says, go in. And she says, well, how else would you do anything? You can't do it from the outside. You have to go in. So she's teaching him the place to read the great mountain where things can happen. Geological phenomena, right? Go to the dark pond, and that he'll do a little bit later on. She also teaches him the great spell of transforming. She stretched her arms out and upward in the invocation of what Dulce would later know. It was a great spell of transforming. Ard spoke the words of the spell awry, as teachers of wizardry must do, lest the spell operate. Dulce knew the trick of hearing them right and remembering them. When Ard was done, he had repeated the words in his mind in silence, half sketching the strange, awkward gestures that were part of them. All at once, his hand stopped. And then he says to Ard, but you can't undo this. And she says, yes, it's irrevocable. Dulce knew no transformation that was irrevocable, no spell that could not be unsaid, except the word of unbinding, which is spoken only once. And then he asks her, but why? And she says, at need. Dulce knew better than to ask for explanation. The need to speak such a spell could not come often. The chance of his ever having to use it was very slight. He let the terrible spell sink down into his mind and be hidden and layered over with 1,000 useful or enlightening mageries and charms, all the lore and rules of Roke, all the wisdom of the books Ard had bequeathed him. Crude, monstrous, useless, it lay in the dark of his mind for 60 years, like the cornerstone of an earlier forgotten house down in the cellar of a mansion full of lights and treasures and children. But it's still there when he needs it, when he senses something is going wrong on Roke. And so what does he do? He goes and he does, in fact, read the mountain. He can tell there's something wrong. So he takes his staff and he goes up to the dark pond, and there he asks, where? The question where is asking, where is the trouble? Where is the fault line? Where is the source of the earthquake that is to come? And a fish leaps from the black, shaking water, a white-gray fish the length of his hand, and as it leapt, it cried out in a small, clear voice in that same language, the language of the making, Yaved. Yaved is the place where he will have to go. So he calls down to Ogion in Gont Port. Ogion stops and says, what is it, master? And then he finds out there's going to be an earthquake. He tells the captain of the ship that he's dealing with, tell everybody to get out of the harbor, sail for the open sea, because Gont Port, rather, is in a long harbor with mountains on either side. And if the earthquake comes, all of that will tumble down onto the port and onto the ships and cause great loss of human life. So he says, sail out, and then I'll handle things here along with my master. He goes off and sends to his master after that, and here we go. His old master was sitting in the grass near the pond eating an apple. Bits of eggshell flecked the ground near his legs, which were caked with drying mud. When he looked up and saw Ogion sending, he smiled a wide, sweet smile. But he looked old. He'd never looked so old. Ogion had not seen him for over a year. Helith was an old man near 80 now, and he was frightened. He smiled with joy to see Ogion, but he was frightened. And then he says, all right, I've got a plan for us. We are going to try to do something about that. He's going to work together with Ogion, and here is his plan. I think what we have to do is to try to hold the fault from slipping much. You at the gates and me at the inner end, in the mountain, working together, We might be able to. I can feel it building up. Can you? And he asks, Ogion says, I can't feel it myself. What is it you feel? How do you feel it? These were technical questions, mage to mage. And here we have a very important point. Helith hesitated before answering. I learned about this from Ard. We find out that Ard is, in fact, his old teacher. He tells Ogion, oh, by the way, she was a woman. So this is very important lore of Earthsea. And Dulse says, the magic that I'm going to do, I learned from Ard, and it's kind of dirty stuff. It's not sticky stuff. And there's a great explanation here. He says, it's not roke magic, nothing against the balance, nothing sticky, that had always been his word for evil doings, spells for gain, curses, black magic, sticky stuff. After searching for words, he went on, dirt, rocks. It's a dirty magic, old, very old as Gont Island. The old powers, Ogion murmured. Helith said, I'm not sure. Will it control the earth itself? And here's where he provides a really important explanation. More a matter of getting in with it, I think, inside. Of course, I know the words, but I'll have to learn what to do as I go. That's the trouble with the big spells. You learn what you're doing while you do it. No chance to practice. And he says, the earth is straining quite soon now, I think. Can you hold the gates open, my dear? And Ogion says, tell me what you'll be doing. And Helith says, no time. Not your sort of thing. And he says, very old stuff what I'll be doing. I wish I'd thought about it more, passed it on to you, but it seemed a bit crude, heavy-handed. She didn't say where she'd learned it. Here, of course, there's different kinds of knowledge after all. She learned it here on Gont. This is Gontish magic. And so Dulce is going to do things on his end. Ogion is going to do things on his end down in Gont Port. And then we have this description about what happens within the mountain as Dulce says the spell. Nothing happened as he said the words Ard had told him. His old witch teacher with her bitter mouth and her long lean arms, the words spoken awry. Nothing happened, and he had time to regret the sunlight and sea wind and to doubt the spell and doubt himself. Before the earth rose about him, dry, warm, and dark. In there he knew he should hurry, that the bones of the earth ached to move, and that he must become them to guide them, but he could not hurry. There was on him the bewilderment of any transformation. He had in his day been fox and bull and dragonfly and knew what it was to change being. This is something that mages do not very frequently because they can become the thing that they've changed into. But this is different. This is becoming the earth itself. He says, this is a slow enlargement. I am vastening, he thought. He reached out towards Yaved, towards the ache, the suffering. And then, as he comes closer to it, he felt a great strength flow into him from the west, as if silence had taken him by the hand after all. Through that link, he could send his own strength, the mountain strength, to help. And they do that. He says to the earth in no tongue of man, be quiet, be easy, there now, hold fast. So there we can be easy. And what happens? He was easy, he was still, he held fast, rock, and earth in the fiery dark of the mountain. All that anybody else sees is Ogion in Gont Port doing his part, and so they think that he is the one who holds back the earthquake. But Ogion says, my teacher was with me, and his teacher was with him when they praised him. I could hold the gate open because he held the mountain still. They praised his modesty and did not listen to him. This is a situation in which Ogion, Dulce, and Ard were all cooperating together through time in order to hold back the earthquake that would have caused great loss of life and devastated Gont Port, and who knows how many other places around the mountain. So Gontish wizardry, Gontish spells save the day, something that isn't taught and can't be learned at Roke, showing us that there is indeed a lot in Earthsea in terms of magic that isn't to be found only in the place where they teach the high arts.